Thank you for the inspirational opening speech, Eugene. With the ever-evolving threat landscape, it is certainly important that we cybersecurity professionals, practitioners, cyber defenders continuously learn from each other to curb advanced threats. Now, our next keynote speaker is another super heavyweight champion in the cybersecurity space. Let us warmly welcome the CTO and founder of HackerOne, Mr. Alex Rice. Take it away.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for InfoSec in the City, SINCON 2020. Really privileged to be kicking this off from the comfort of my garage out here in San Francisco. Hopefully everyone is staying safe, enjoying and had a good New Year's, and is ready to kick off the year. I've got a bit of a broad topic to cover here around just a set of things that I'm observing in the industry, and how I hope hackers can contribute to a little bit of a better outlook for 2021 than we had in 2020. I'd like to think a little bit on the optimistic side that we're turning a corner here, and things can look up for the better, even if it doesn't feel like that day to day. I find it always like I'm a hopeless optimist on that front. So before we start diving in and talking about hackers, my name's Alex Rice. I'm the CTO and founder of a company called HackerOne. We're honored to be a community of hackers or security researchers, pen testers from all over the world that contribute to making software safer and technology more trustworthy. I wanted to share a bit of a story of that I think does a good job of highlighting some of the headwinds that hackers in general have had in making those positive contributions to the world. So it's going to start us off with one of my favorite hackers on the planet. If folks don't recognize him, this is Sammy Kamkar from a number of years ago, that has stayed active in the security community, made some very meaningful contributions to our collective security from technology stacks across the board, from web security to home security to vulnerabilities in our garage door openers, and privacy techniques to make so that websites have a harder time tracking us with cookies and the like. We are all unquestionably safer because of Sammy. But I wanted to rewind a little bit to around 2006, 2007, where Sammy first introduced himself to the world. Back then, Sammy decided to do a bit of a prank on MySpace, the predominant leading social network of the time. He had found a cross-site scripting vulnerability in the site, and not being an evil person, decided to do a bit of a prank on it. So he weaponized the vulnerability to cause anyone who was impacted by this vulnerability to become friends with Sammy, and then immediately post, most of all, Sammy is my hero. So he codes this up, he sends it to one of his friends, and goes to bed. He wakes up the next morning to see that it's working. He's got 221 friend requests on MySpace, and is feeling great about all his newfound friends. Grabs some breakfast, and an hour later has 480 friend requests now, getting quite popular. And that's the moment when he realizes, like, uh-oh, this growth here is looking more exponential than linear. So fast forward 18 hours, but at the end of the day, Sammy became the most popular person on social networking of all time at that point, with over a million friend requests. And about an hour later, MySpace goes down. They take the site offline because it wasn't handling it and needed to solve the problem. Sammy reflects on this now pretty apologetically of feeling very bad about his prank turning out into into this. He didn't hear anything from MySpace for a while. Didn't go through any steps to hide himself, like it was his real profile. He was based in Los Angeles, just a few miles away from MySpace headquarters, but didn't hear from them for a bit until it was 6 or 9 months later or so. The FBI pays Sammy a visit. Sammy ultimately ended up getting about 3 years of probation from any computer usage, and had to do quite a bit of community service as restitution. And I think that's a little bit maybe a justice in some definitions, but a little bit of a disappointing outcome, because Sammy is absolutely capable of making more positive contributions to society, as he has since then. He's gone on to contribute to security research, as we talked about. But at the exact same time, there was another social network just getting started. It also had cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in it back at the time, and another pair of young hackers found a cross-site scripting vulnerability and also did a prank. This prank, though, replaced all of the CSS on the site so that all your Facebook profile, if you got infected with this, would look like a MySpace page instead of a Facebook profile, and they called it Face Space. So everyone that got infected with this thing slowly turned the site into Face Space. But instead of the FBI coming their way, one of the founders and head of engineering at Facebook at the time found out, had attribution on who was responsible for this, sends an ANA message to the individual responsible, Chris Putnam, and a very different tack, though, and ended up hiring him onto the engineering team to protect against categories like this, and be one of the initial security hires to the organization. And that path ultimately helped Facebook develop a much stronger security culture than MySpace was ever able to introduce. But it's also it was a much more productive outlet for those skills and that creativity. And it kind of it's something I reflect on a lot around how should we treat people with skills like this? How do we guide this towards more positive outcomes? And I think we've turned a corner where there's a broad consensus that companies need hackers. They should be hired by companies rather than prosecuted and punished. That's kind of the basis of where we're at in HackerOne. Today, there's about 2,000 organizations on the platform that invite hackers to participate in an ethical, productive manner. And those hackers have resolved over 200,000 vulnerabilities, and I'm very pleased to say that we've made them $125 million richer, which is just a fantastic contribution, both to them, but also to all of our digital safety. So one of the first themes I was going to cover here is the concept of just who are these hackers, what good can they provide to society, and what how do we all benefit from this? We really think about hacker as a very broad definition, originally defined back at MIT in the 70s. In their hacker jargon file, they defined it as someone who enjoys the intellectual challenge of finding creative ways around limitations. And I think this really nails the heart of what it means to be a hacker. It's about encountering limitations, finding ways around it. No mention of good or evil, right? Motives are kind of secondary to just that creative pursuit of finding a way to do something that wasn't possible. We spent a lot of time trying to understand who hacks today. Why do they hack? What do they look like? One of the most incredible strengths of the community is the diversity of backgrounds and perspectives and takes on security. So I wanted to share a little bit about the hackers that we work with in the HackerOne community. Who are they? What do they do? Where do they come from? How do they get into this? And spend a little bit of time talking about that. Vast majority of them are in the 18 to 24 range, or really 18 to 35. Um, and It's not a long tenured career. Most of the people entering the industry today or practicing hacking skills on a regular basis, surprisingly, have not been doing it for very long, which is great to see, um, and also I hope speaks to the level of opportunity that exists for these skills. It's something that you can get good at in reasonably short time horizons when people really set their mind to it and practice, which is both good news and bad news, because the inverse of this is true for criminals that are learning hacking skills. Like the folks that we're up against, it does not take that long to become relatively competent at breaching software security. And we've seen the impact of this on the negative side, the negative effects of this on criminals that are able to breach, or kids that are able to prank large social networks. And what we haven't been good at is converting this to positive opportunity, both professionally and economic, for the folks that have these skill sets. I think it's really fascinating to spend a little bit of time understanding the motivations of people that decide to do this type of work, that decide to hone and practice these skills. And far and away, the reason that we see reflects back on that early definition of a hacker, that we say it's there for the challenge. It's that creative challenge of accomplishing something that shouldn't be possible. But increasingly, people are doing it to make money. This is, and as they should be, this is a valuable skill set, and those skills should improve your life, and economic opportunity is one of the most meaningful ways to do that. But the list of motivations for other people are just as diverse as the group of people that participate in this skill set. They're there to learn, they're there to share, they're there to have fun. They're doing it for altruistic reasons of protecting and defending and doing good in the world and helping others. And there's a little bit of ego in it as well. Like, this is, you feel good when you know you've done something meaningful there. And then on the next slide, we wanted to spend a little time understanding the origin of how you get started in this. And similarly here, there's a pretty diverse story for how do people get started with hacking. There's a lot of people, the impetus was seeing the impact of a breach in the public. That starts triggering that curiosity around, like, how does this work? How does this happen? Some people have stumbled upon vulnerabilities themselves, or engaged in forums and chat rooms where other hackers were already sharing how they did it, and they got hooked from that perspective. A lot of folks got into it from gaming, which is how I got into computer security, was reverse engineering games that I wanted to have a bit of an unfair advantage on back in the 90s. Didn't view it as a computer security career at the time, but the skill sets picked up there lend themselves very well to the security industry as a whole. But luckily, where there's the biggest opportunity for starting people into hacking is in school. Very few, almost an astonishingly small number of the security professionals today learned their skills or got started on this track in a structured education environment. And I think that's a critical area that we need to figure out how to move into, to get more people out there protecting us and doing good here. Hacking is, in some cases, a full-time job. In some cases, it augments a full-time job, but the vast majority of people who are contributing to this broader vulnerability disclosure practice aren't doing it as a full-time activity. It's something that they dabble in. And as we really dig into this, we see that this is key to being effective at it. The best security professionals don't necessarily specialize in one particular area. The how do we overcome some limitation is the ability to do that is stronger the broader your base. And so folks that are software engineers during the day, but set aside a few hours a week to do the opposite of that are very effective at the type of work that they do. Not true across the board. There's certainly elements of security where going very, very deep into an area produces the best outcome, and you see that reflected in the in the data here as well. But this diversity of how much time should you dedicate to it is a promising trend, we think. And then finally, overwhelmingly, folks that have this skill set have been able to leverage it into full-time employment at a particular place. And this is ultimately where we need to get to. We can't just have people on the outside looking for vulnerabilities and breaking things. You have to be part of the solution, and it's hard to be part of the solution if you're not part of the company that's ultimately building these things. So we think it's fantastic to see people that develop and leverage these skill sets start joining companies to practice these skills full time. There's a bit of a US centric look on it today, but I really wanted to hope folks take away the message here that we need hacking. It is a good activity. We cannot build secure software without it, but we are not equipping the next generation of people to bring this skill set to the world. The training and on-the-job training is inadequate. Organizations aren't investing in training. There's far too many unfilled cybersecurity jobs, and the vast majority of computer science programs and college degrees in general don't incorporate this into their work. And so we're working on changing this. And I'd encourage everyone listening to this, if you have an opportunity to give back to the education system or incorporate this into formal programs or build these training programs, it's one of the highest value activities we can do as security professionals in 2021 and beyond. So changing track a little bit from hacking to good, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what should we prioritize in the face of all the different things we have to prioritize in defending technology. This is a incredibly difficult task, and just finding the problems is just one part of the solution. And then once we know about it, what do we do about it often becomes overwhelming for CISOs and CIOs and heads of engineering or anyone responsible for building secure technology. What you do once you know you have a problem is an overwhelming task for many folks. One of the most useful things that I found for organizing these teams after talking to many of our customers that struggle with these challenges is the ones that are doing it the best have kind of broken from a traditional security perspective of mitigating risk completely, but instead orient themselves around speed. And I think a talk from Black Hat last year by Kelly and Nicole, I'd highly recommend about going a little bit deeper into how to think about speed as it applies to security. And I like the way that they framed it, that I'll summarize basically as good security teams have the mindset and the expectation that their security controls are going to fail, and they plan for it. It's not a question of, will the security control fail? Every control that you develop is done with the mindset of, it is inevitable that this control will fail. What then? And then with that mindset, you start to move yourself away from, your goal is not to avoid incidents. Your goal and your orientation is to continuously improve your ability to respond to those incidents. And then there's one key outcome from this, which is, if your information security program is focused on avoiding failure, whether you're tracking the time between failure or the number of incidents, or you're counting bad things that happened, all of those metrics will lead you astray. And I'd encourage you to spend a little time thinking about what this means. If you were to reimagine defending technology with the expectation that everything's going to fail, we are not going to avoid incidents, but we want to be as efficient as we can about them. And counting bad things or counting failure or focusing on failure is the wrong orientation. Similarly, Katie here, in pursuit of what metrics to track, has something that I found very effective at our own program at HackerOne, but for many of our customers, which is the percent of vulnerabilities that you're remediating within an SLA. It's a very simplistic metric, but it's an incredibly powerful one at assessing, are we getting better at responding to vulnerabilities? And this is an example from with a vulnerability management and vulnerability disclosure lens on it. But this is a far better metric than what you traditionally see in those places, those spaces, which are often based around quantity or completeness or risk scores. And if you kind of ignore all of that for your program and instead say, our goal is to be as fast as we can here, and orient around speed and learning is a very, very powerful way to approach this. So we track this for all of the programs that we host on HackerOne. We try to guide and consult customers in this direction around, look, time to resolve, how quickly are you remediating is one of the most important signals of maturity for your program, and one of the best things that you can do for risk. So the whole product experience is oriented around getting things remediated faster. What's happening? And you see, there's a bit of a delta across industries. In some cases, this is a lot harder than others. And for our, like spending 57 days to fix and remediate issues in the aerospace industry is actually pretty good. These are more surprisingly mature organizations in the data set that we have here, whereas folks like cryptocurrency companies, like, not spending too long to resolve incidents is a big problem for someone where the stakes are that fast for them. So there's a spectrum here, but the median's actually not bad. It was about 17 days for 2019. But unfortunately, we've had after several years of progress there, from going from about a month in 2017 down to 17 days in 2019, we were on track with it improving, but we've been seeing this slowly creep up again post COVID. We're back up to about 20 days again, being the median time to remediate across the sample set that we have, which I think speaks a lot to the challenges that we've had during COVID. And to me, was one of the more worrying trends of cybersecurity. We're all trying to do more with less. We've got more folks working from home. We've got an expanded attack surface. Like the challenges that we've had during COVID have taken a toll on every organization out there, and it's reflected in our ability to respond faster to security problems. I think we urgently have to start turning this trend in the other direction. We've got to adopt to this new normal of working. We've got to figure out how to get properly resourced, properly staffed, and the business aligned around speed being ultimately what we need to focus on to make meaningful progress and protect our customers. So I hope we start pushing this in the other direction again. We're paying a close eye on it. I'd encourage anyone who's in a defender position to start making this one of the most visible metrics that you have for your executive staff and your stakeholders. Next, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite topics in security around transparency. And my general thinking on this is related to what we just talked about at the very beginning of the last section, where Kelly and Nicole so cleanly stated that like things are going to break. Stop trying to avoid it. And I think generally speaking, this is a healthy perspective to have in information security. Bad things happen. And one of the most pertinent questions for us is, how do we retain or rebuild trust when they do? If you're in an area where trust is essential, which is almost all of our businesses, and we know that bad things are going to happen on a regular basis, how do we continue to instill trust in our customers and our constituents and our executives and our board that it's going to be okay, even though these bad things are guaranteed to happen? I have found that transparency is one of the most powerful tools and under leveraged tools that we have to address this and to build trust. I think one of the things that illustrates this well, and there's a lot on this graph, so bear with me for a second, but what you're seeing here is the causes of death in the United States. This is like one of the worst things that can happen to people. Unquestionably a bad thing, happens every day in the United States. People die. And this is a little bit stale data. I was reflecting on this when I was putting it together. I really want to see an updated version of this that has COVID-19 on here as well, because you see the pneumonia and the flu down there at 2.5%. But generally speaking, the vast majority of people are dying for these reasons. This is still largely representative of what death looks like in the United States, and it is not dramatically far off from most other developed countries. However, these are the causes of death that people Google for in the United States. And far and away, the most probable way for you to die in the United States is heart disease. And almost nobody proactively searches for information on it. Cancer is at least somewhat representative, but then as you get down the list, you see people spending a lot of time researching things that are very low probability of it happening to them. And then this is compounded a bit by, what does the media report on? What do you hear about? Like as you open up the news or your social networking feed, what's your perception from there of what's going to kill you? What's the bad thing that's going to happen to you today? And here, there is this disproportionate emphasis on terrorism, homicide, suicide, which are very unlikely ways for you to meet your demise, but consume the majority of what we spend the time worrying about or focusing on. And this pattern here of humans not having a rational understanding of risk and bad things happening plays itself out time and time again across a number of areas, including cybersecurity and our industry. I love this quote from Nicholas Kristof at the New York Times. I think captures it well. He says, in journalism, we cover what has happened today. They're all over a press conference or an explosion, but they don't cover the things that happen every day. They miss the stories about everyday improvement and everyday progress, because the things that happen every day are never quite news. In this quote, he's talking about diarrhea. Diarrhea is the leading cause of death in children under 5. In like the 30 minutes that I've been talking, something like 40 kids have died from diarrhea in the world. And when is the last time you saw a news article about diarrhea? It's just, it's not something we spend a lot of time thinking about. If you take this and you apply this analogy to security, what are the things that we hear about all the time and we focus on all the time? This week it's SolarWinds and the breach of the week, which is probably worth us spending time on. But I guarantee you, since SolarWinds has broken, there's been thousands of bad things happening at organizations that don't have SolarWinds deployed and are probably not going to have a similar level attack against them, that are just getting ignored and not getting our attention, and we're not learning from. And I find this to be a really helpful framing for what should we be worried about today, and trying to take a balanced perspective to what are the bad things that are going to happen, and most importantly, how do we talk about them in a way that shows this everyday improvement. This is an example of headlines from breaches that happened at different organizations that all have an identical root cause at it. And I'm sure as you read some of these, you start to form an opinion about what it might have been. These are all big companies: GitHub and Google, Twitter, Facebook. They know not to store plain text passwords. They have great practices around not storing plain text passwords. All of them have had this happen because an engineer somewhere turned on logging. And I called this example out because I think there's two important lessons to take away from this. One is, this is not a good thing that plain text passwords were discovered at organizations. It's bad. We should fix it. It's a bad thing that happened. There's almost zero risk to anybody because of this. These were all logging incidents. There's no data breaches associated with it. There's no real negative outcome. It's something we need to fix, but do we need a bunch of news articles about it? Do we need people freaking out about this? Do we need consumers to be worried that their Google password has been compromised? No. But that's how InfoSec is oriented today, because we spent a lot of time focused on news rather than what's likely to kill you, what's most likely to cause a breach. Where do we need to focus our time and energy? That's number one. Number two here is the root causes associated with these. Even though all these organizations have the same problem, there is no learning mechanism for them to learn from each other around exactly what happened. How do I prevent this? How do we detect it? How do I know? So everyone is left to their own devices to try to interpret from these news articles what this means, what you should do about it, and whether or not it matters. And that's just a huge missed opportunity, both for these organizations to build trust by saying, hey, actually, like, there is no risk to you. This is not a big deal, but it's good hygiene, and here's what everyone should learn from this. And so we're doomed to keep repeating these same mistakes and dedicating precious time and resources towards things that really don't matter. One of the things that I think helps this a lot is developing a track record of talking about the bad things that happen in cybersecurity on a daily basis, around setting this baseline of, we know we have vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities come in all the time. Here's how we resolve them. And here's our process for letting you know about something that really affects you. Like, here's how you as a journalist can tell that this was just another vulnerability on a Tuesday versus this is newsworthy. This is something you need to write about. This is an example of Starbucks here, which is they're a customer of ours, but they also have a very progressive team that's very transparent with their customers. They disclose most of the vulnerabilities that are found in their technology stack for purposes of helping others learn, building and establishing trust that you can trust them, and that even though they have vulnerabilities and bad things can happen, that they're proactive about it, they're taking steps to do it. And most important, this helps disarm the daily news of, like, if a journalist would find out about any one of these vulnerabilities, suddenly it's not news anymore. It's just another vulnerability that everybody has, and sorry, it's not news. There's nothing to explode over here. Without this putting context, if you were to just take this line right here, that feels like a news article, right? Feels like something that you would see on the front page of the New York Times or the Guardian of like, but it's not news. Things like this happen all the time. There's actually zero risk to consumers. Consumers are safer because this happened. Zero risk might be a little bit far, but in this particular case, there was no harm to consumers, no need to worry about it. It was found, it was resolved, and now you are safer here than at your data is safer here than at other places. And that's important progress that we don't talk about. Similarly, the Department of Defense, which is a very surprising source of transparency to me in the United States, does the same thing. They also now share a large majority of the vulnerabilities that are discovered in their systems for purposes of showing that there's continuous improvement, that they are trustworthy, and helping others learn. And this is just it's hard to understand how incredible it is for me to see this, because there's so much that you can learn from looking at the bad things that happened to others and how they did it, and applying that to your own programs or your own skill set. So I'd call that out. We try to correlate this as much as we can and make it as accessible as we can, because we think there's an incredible amount of value in this transparency. But the meta benefit to your businesses and the businesses that are protecting your data is that they're able to tell more confident stories about should you trust them with your data, and how can you expect them to respond if a bad thing does happen. To start all of this, I think a lot of this begins with the acceptance that you're going to have vulnerabilities, bad things are going to happen, and you want to learn about them and you want to have a conversation about them. Unfortunately, we're not there. This is getting better. This number was 94% about 18 months ago. Now it's about 82% of the Forbes Global 2000 there. So we're trending towards it, but the vast majority of the largest businesses in the world that are protecting most of our data, they do not have policies for vulnerability disclosure. There is no transparency that you can expect from them other than a breach notification. And there's no established process for you to point out a problem to them if it exists. And the impact that this has on the hacker community is, of our community of hackers, 63% of them have chosen not to report a vulnerability that they discovered. This is an incredible missed opportunity to get more of this security feedback into organizations and develop positive conversations around how we get more secure. About 21% of them say it's because they couldn't find out how to report, and another 15% said that they just got ignored even when they did. We've got to do better on this front. It starts with transparency and hopefully leads towards trust. Breaking it down I wanted to specifically pull some local city data for the folks local there in Singapore. Y'all are home to a little more than a dozen of the Forbes Global 2000. Unfortunately, none of them have a process to report a security vulnerability to them, which I hope we can partner on making better. I want to see this go up to a fraction of a percent sometime in the next year. I think we can make progress on it. But the story is not that much better globally. Like the US only has 28%. And that's the norm for most developed countries out there. So we've got a long way to go on this front. I wanted to leave the transparency topic with one particular thought that is one of the most predominant things that is on my mind these days, and I hope you would walk away from this, which is fundamentally, because of our aversion to transparency in cybersecurity, we don't learn from our mistakes. And we have to learn from our mistakes. We have to figure out how to do this. The stakes are just too high for learning from the mistakes of others to be a voluntary practice. I think we've got to move towards a model where the norm is sharing incident data. I got this from Alex Stamos in his Blue Hat keynote last year. I encourage you to listen to it if you're there. But there's a great model for this in automotive and the aviation industries, where when there's a mistake or even a near miss, there's a thorough incident investigation, accident report, and it's published for everyone to review and learn from. If we, I think Alex Stamos said it quite well, where if the aviation industry approached transparency and continuous improvement the same way that the cybersecurity industry does, it would be impossible for us to fly. Like planes would be falling out of the sky left and right. It would be just an unworkable industry. And the model that they found for mistakes are going to happen, that's okay. There's a safe way to share without exposing yourself to additional liability and additional risk. And this is how we get better collectively as an industry, is a powerful model for us to consider as an industry. I think we have to figure out how to do this. And my dream is that we get to a world where transparent, detailed incident reports are just the norm for cybersecurity, whether it was a full-on breach or a near miss. If we can't figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't shame and disincentivize companies from doing so, we're doomed to never move forward here. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be a long way to go global. So I wanted to encourage everyone to do their small part to add a little bit of transparency to whatever area of information security you're working in. And a little bit at a time, we can normalize, like, bad things happen here. It's not news. It's okay. Let's share. We try to practice what we preach here at HackerOne. So in our contracts, we commit to disclosing every security vulnerability in our environment, no matter the severity, no matter how it looks. You can find this at hackerone.com/security and browse through every security vulnerability we've had going back 6 years, including incidents that we have no obligation to report on. I gave you an example here of a attack that we suffered in October. No data breach involved, so we don't have to tell anyone about it. But we think it's a wasted opportunity for us to do that incident investigation and not share it with the world. This is not an easy thing to do. It's a scary thing to do, honestly. But we're going to have to take these little steps to show others that transparency is actually how we fix cybersecurity and re-earn trust with everyone that we're building technology for. So I wanted to leave you with those 3 thoughts for the day. Hacking is good. If above everything else, prioritize speed, and please join me on my crusade for transparency. We as an industry are not trusted. People do not trust the technology that they depend upon. They do not trust that when you enter data into a website that it won't get breached. We have to turn that around. And I don't see how we restore trust in our profession without bringing transparency to bear on the problem. Thanks everyone for sitting with me wherever you're at. I hope to get back out physically to visit y'all for the next conference. I'm optimistic that we'll be back to travel as normal soon. So hope to meet folks in person next time around. But please reach out to me with any thoughts or comments at arice@hackerone.com or Senior Rose on Twitter. Really, thank you to all the organizers for having me here. It really was a privilege. Everyone, please enjoy the rest of the conference and stay safe out there.